Okay, so hello everybody. Welcome to our psychology Q&A session for the ACHD network. My name is Jane McLachlan. I'm a clinical psychologist with the ACHD team at Liverpool Heart and Chest Hospital. And this is...
Hi, I'm Jo Jury. I'm also a clinical psychologist at the Heart and Chest Hospital team. Jane and I work together.
We decided to put this little Q&A session together after there's been a few questions really that have come through the network. I think that everybody's in a lot of agreement around, and we thought this might be quite a nice opportunity to put a little bit of a video together to answer those questions and to put it out there, so hopefully it will help people as a group. So what we'll do is we'll start going through the questions together, and me and Jo will have a little bit of a chat and hopefully try to answer some of these questions for you. So this is where I need to, if I share my full screen. Our first
You should
question.
be able to just share the PowerPoint.
The first question here was, as the weeks go on, I feel my mood dipping during lockdown, and how can I manage this?
The first thing I always say when people talk about this is just, this is absolutely normal, isn't it, Jane? Part and parcel of being in this situation. It's happening to everybody, regardless of what your mood was like before all of this, or what health condition you might have or not. Everybody is talking about the mood going up and down like a roller coaster. That's how a lot of people are saying. It's this kind of, I keep hearing people using the term COVID roller coaster. It's kind of, there's weeks, isn't there, and days, and it just feels like for no reason as well. You wake up and just go, I can't do it today.
And I think the issue is a lot of the days feel the same because we are restricted in our lives now. So they all blur into one, and we don't have that same pattern that we might have used to have done, or variability during a week that we might have used to have done. Yeah.
And I think there's lots of talk about people being worried that they are becoming depressed, and there's a worry that we're creating a mental health problem in this country by lots of people being isolated. But I don't necessarily think that's the case. It's just, this is a very normal reaction, isn't it, to a really abnormal situation that we're all in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's the key. It's such a normal reaction. But I think, it is a side effect of the, like we said, of the context that people are in, but we're aware that there are things that people can do to make changes, just even in the limitations of lockdown, to make things just that little bit easier on a day-to-day. And one of the things that I've been talking to a lot of people around is having that routine and that structure in some way put back. So I'm aware of this, as you can see from my background. I'm working at home from day to day, which means that a lot of those boundaries get blurred between work and home life, and you can easily fall into patterns of sleeping in and not maybe getting dressed, and having, like I said, all that routine and structure that you used to have has sort of gone out the window. But if you kind of keep aware of that and maybe put some sort of your old routine back in place, it's really helpful. So that might just be about getting up at the same time that you would have done, as if if you're not working at the moment, as if you were going to work. If you are, then getting up as you would be if you were traveling to work. It's getting dressed, having a shower at the regular time, having those structured meal times, maybe planning some activities throughout the day if you are shielding and at home and not working at the moment.
Yeah, I think I've definitely heard from people both within work and in my life as well, who have said it's easy just to stay in your pajamas all day, because what's the point? What are you getting dressed for? And the important thing is, for me anyway, the point is that it's for you. You're not getting dressed for anyone else. You're getting dressed for yourself, and actually that's more important than other people. If it's if you're going to feel more awake, more alert, and you're going to feel like you are set for the day because you've gone and got dressed, that's really important.
Yeah, and I think that for the people who wear makeup out there as well, put a bit of makeup on to make yourself feel that bit better. Put your favourite outfit on.
Yeah.
I think as well it's about kind of the activities that you do as well at home, because I know that it can be so easy just to sit on the couch and end up just watching TV and watching it for hours, and you get sucked in. TV is addictive, let's face it, especially if you've got Netflix or Prime or any of these kind of streaming channels.
Disney Plus.
Yeah, Disney Plus. But I think having I mentioned before about that variability, and I think it's about having a bit of a balance between the kind of tasks that you're doing day to day. So, you know, are the things that you have to do, you know, the washing, the ironing, the cleaning, and so on, are the things that you really enjoy, that maybe, especially if you're not able to do them as easily. I'm trying to think, you know, so it might have been going to cinema, it might have been, what do people like to do? Go and play sports and whatnot. But finding other ways of doing those things, of connecting with that. I know there's a lot of things online at the moment that can help you sort of connect and do those things. So it might be, you know, watching a movie with a friend via Zoom. That just getting those bit of enjoyable activities in your week and making sure you've got that balance spread out.
And I suppose if you used to go, you know, in the morning to the coffee shop and go get a coffee, or you used to go and meet up with a friend for lunch, you can still do those things, and that's important to keep doing those things even if you don't feel like it. I think when your mood dips, it's really easy to just bury your head and not do the things you would have done, especially if you've got into the whole what's the point. But actually, it's really important when your mood is down, it's really important that those are the times when you do engage in those things you would have done before, but just in a different way. So yeah, if you're feeling a bit down and you don't want to connect with a friend, or you don't want to send a message to someone or do a video call with someone, that's the time when you need to actually be doing it, because it'll do you the world of good.
It's a 5-minute rule. So tell yourself that I have to do it, and even if I do it for 5 minutes, let's see how it goes. And from my experience, when after 5 minutes I find I've forgotten that I didn't want to do it, back doing something else.
Yeah, that's true, isn't it? You think, oh, well, just similar to anything really. Even if, you know, if you're going out for a walk, if you're able to go out for a walk, and you think, oh, I really can't be bothered, you just need to put your trainers on. The first thing you need to do is put your shoes on, or whatever shoes you're wearing. Just put your shoes on, and then decide if you want to go out, and then put your coat on if you need to, if it's raining. And then step over the doorstep, and then you can just go to the end of the road. It's all just a series of small steps you need to take. And then before you know it, you've gone for a walk around the block and, you know, come back home again. So
yeah,
you've done it then.
Yeah. And you've mentioned kind of the big one there with activity. It's about moving as well. And I think all the medical team probably talk about this a lot as well, because it's about keeping your heart healthy too, but also your mind healthy.
And we know, don't we, there's loads and loads of research that shows that doing exercise, whatever that exercise is, you know, it can be walking up and down the garden. It doesn't have to be going out, you know, for a jog around the park, but just moving your body has a direct impact on your mood, and does lift your mood. It releases endorphins, which are the things that go around our body that make us feel a bit happier. And also the good thing about that is it has a knock-on effect on sleep. So the more you move during the day, the more you will be tired at night time as well, which we know is an issue for people, is sleep routines and not being tired at night time and those sorts of things. So yeah, it's really important.
Yeah.
So yeah, sleep I think is probably something to mention as well.
Yeah.
I would think sleep is really important for our mental health. At times like this, people kind of, again, it's routine, isn't it? It's coming out of a routine, napping during the day because maybe, you know, there's not a lot else going on. Again, like Jane was saying right at the beginning there, you said that the routine for getting up at the same time every day, getting showered, getting dressed, it's the same with sleep. You know, if you're used to sleeping 8 hours a night, then it's important to try and keep that up as much as you can. And that might be about forcing yourself to get up at the same time in the morning, even if you haven't slept very well the night before, so that you are then going to be tired for the next the next day, because if you're sleeping until kind of 11 in the morning because you've got nothing else to do, it's going to have a knock-on effect on your sleep that night. If you're napping during the day, also similarly, and all of that is going to throw your body out of its usual routine, and then you'll find that actually your mood is then affected because you're not sleeping quite as well.
Absolutely. I'm just
so can I touch on the gratitude thing as well?
You can, yes.
Yeah, because what we know about mood is that mood is affected by kind of a few key things. It's affected by feeling like you've done something with your day, so feeling like you've achieved something. So, you know, Jane, you were saying there, weren't you, like doing the washing, getting the ironing done, getting housework done, doing jobs around the house, you know, whatever you need to be doing. Getting showered, that's an achievement. Getting up and getting showered and getting dressed, that's an achievement. You've started for the day. It's important to build in things that are enjoyable. So again, Jane, coming back to what you said, Jane, doing the things that you enjoyed doing beforehand, going and having a nice coffee, treating yourself, if that's what you do, go and have a nice coffee, treat yourself, just go sit in the garden or go sit by the window or go sit on the sofa with the cat or you know, whatever your setup is, and just really enjoy that coffee. Connecting with others every day if you can, if there's somebody that you can have a bit of a meaningful chat with, or you can go online and play games with them, however you feel that you can connect to other people, even if you play the Xbox over the Xbox with people online, anything like that. And then more recently, what we know about mental health and low mood is that if you have a sense of gratitude at the end of the day, so that's just being thankful for something that's happened, you can look back on your day and think, right, okay, so it might have been a bad day today, but what is it in there that I'm thankful for? And there will always be something. And then that kind of lifts your mood as well. So feeling that sense of gratitude for what you've got. So it could be that, you know, you are grateful for the fact that you had hot water in the shower, or you can be grateful for the fact that a friend sent you a message, or that the sun was shining, or even being grateful for the rain. But it's a good idea towards the end of the day to kind of have a list of a few things, maybe kind of 3 or 4 things that you were grateful for in that day. And that really does directly impact on your mood.
And it's kind of nice to record those things. If you keep them in a little logbook or a diary, you can look back on to see how these things build up over time as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good idea, isn't it?
We put together a little sort of summary slide, I think, in thinking about that question. Here it is.
Yeah.
Thinking, have we covered all of those things? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, sticking to the facts.
Yeah, I think actually that's probably something worth mentioning, and goes on. It kind of interlinks with some of the questions that we've been asked that we'll go on to in a moment. But I think a lot of the issues around mood at the moment is associated with the kind of nature and the context of what's going on for us, and the COVID crisis is. I mean, it's just that, isn't it? I mean, the fact that we use it crisis or pandemic, they're very scary words. And there's a lot of media stories that have been put out there, and the way that these media stories are reported have that negative slant. But I think we have to be cautious about where we're getting our information from. I will talk about kind of accessing information in a little while, but making sure, and when I say stick to the facts, I'm thinking about kind of it's about accessing the right information, isn't it? But also accessing it in the right way. Am I making sense there?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's especially right at the start of all this, there was just a flood, wasn't there, of social media and news stories, and you know, like you say, Jane, it's all that kind of, you can read and read and read for hours about this, can't you, and never get to the end of it. And there are places like Twitter and Facebook and things like that. Sometimes people get kind of hyped up and share things, and sometimes it's not particularly useful because it's not coming from that, you know, a knowledge base of facts.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, it's just choosing what you read, and if you know, maybe if you just put the news headlines on in the morning, or once a day or something, if you feel that you need to be connected to it, then you can do. But sitting for hours on Facebook and Twitter, not necessarily helpful.
No, and I think it's paying attention to what impacts your mood as well. Because if you've spent, half an hour flicking through all these news stories, and you notice suddenly afterwards you feel really deflated and lethargic, and actually you can't be bothered doing anything at that point, have a think. Actually, is this my trigger? Is this the thing that's making me feel that bit lower from day to day? And how can I manage that in a better way? So that's not to say limiting your access to news outlets. If you need to know what's going on in the world, that's fine, but thinking about how much time you do it and when you do it. So maybe have a check of the news stories just before you do something really pleasant and nice, linking it into what Joe was saying before about the enjoyable activities.
And don't be reading the news or anything like that just before you go to bed.
Yes.
I have learnt.
Maybe when you first get up as well, because it sets you off for the day, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. I like that idea though, Jane, doing it just before you're going to do something nice, because then you've already planned something else, rather than ending up half an hour scrolling through Facebook or scrolling through the news. Actually, if you give yourself a 10-minute slot, but then you know that you're going to then go and have, a nice lunch, or you're just about to go and have a video call with a friend, or you're about to go for a walk, then it's something else, isn't it, then, to lift your mood afterwards.
Yeah. Okay, have we covered everything for that question, do you think?
I think so, yeah.
So we'll move on to the next ones that have been sent to us. And one we've got here is, I cannot stop worrying about what catching COVID would mean for me and my heart condition. And I think, again, a really common concern, particularly, I think, not just for our ACHD population, but for a lot of people with long-term physical health conditions. This is an even more frightening time. And again, linking back to what we were talking about there with media news stories and the focus on people who have got serious conditions to be shielding, and things like that can be frightening. It's a massive unknown, and I think that's the key there, isn't it? It's this unknown and uncertainty that naturally breeds our anxiety.
As human beings, we don't cope well with uncertainty, unpredictability. Actually, what generally you tend to find is people cope better if it's a bad news story, but if they know about it and if they have some sort of predictability. I'm probably not explaining it. It's my turn not to explain it well, but if you know something bad is going to happen in the future, actually our brains cope better with that than if you're not quite sure if something bad or something good could happen. Because I think we tend to be able to think about things and plan for things and make plans for what to do when that bad thing's going to happen. But at the moment, we don't know, do we? We don't know what the future looks like, so it's really scary for us.
And I think there's something key there, because you're saying that actually if there's predictability, as humans we tend to start to make plans. Now that's what we're good at. We're good at planning. Now there's something in that question that we got sent there was, I cannot stop worrying. And I think knowing the purpose of worry is really helpful. We all do it. It's a normal human behavior. And often worry is useful, because say, for example, I worried about the brakes on my car not working. I would more likely then put a plan in to go and get them checked, get them fixed. So that worry has then instigated me to do an action. So it's that motivation, I need to act on it. Obviously then the difficulties arise when we feel like there's nothing that we can do. And I wonder whether that's what this COVID situation has created for a lot of us, that what can we do? And I guess that's where we need to think about, because there are things that we can do, there are things that we can control, there's things that we can't control. So it might be thinking about, actually, how is my worry useful here, and how can I use that worry to put a plan in place for the things that I can do? And that's things like keeping yourself safe. So if you're shielding, following the guidelines, washing hands regularly, thinking about the use of masks appropriately. Trying to think about it. We covered everything really in terms of safety.
It's things that are in your control. So it's tricky, because actually in terms of making decisions around risk, it's really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I know lots of people are wondering, is it safe for me to, for example, handle the shopping when the shopping comes into the house? Is it safe for me to have a takeaway? And actually nobody knows, do they? We don't know what that level of risk is. So it's really hard to make that decision about what is in your control and what isn't. And also there's got to be a limit with that as well. So you might find actually that in order to feel a sense of control in this uncontrollable world, what you do is then, the washing comes in and the shopping comes in and you wash it all down, wipe it all down with disinfectant. And if you're spending 2 hours of your day doing that and it's making you feel unpleasant and it's making you feel even more worried, then you've got to think, actually, is that risk worth it? And there's no right or wrong there, I don't think, because we obviously, you and I, Jane, we don't know what the risks are either, do we? So we can't guide people either way. But it's trying to kind of get a balance, I suppose, between what might be safe and what might not be. I don't know.
And
It's really tricky, isn't it?
Because you're saying that it's actually being aware of when whatever you're doing is having an impact on the way that you're feeling. So the more that you're washing things, is that making you more anxious over the long term, or is it keeping that anxiety going? I wonder whether there's something there as well about that, because we talk a lot of things you can control. Now, worry is something that we all, I think, in a way, try to control. So I cannot stop worrying in that question makes me think, is that then a worry pops into your head about what it means to me if I get this virus? What do you then do with that worry? Are you trying to push it away? Or are you kind of caught up in it, thinking about it, trying to solve through it for hours, for minutes, hours, whatever it takes? Or are you doing something else? And I think that's the part that we can think about in our role as psychologists, that we can't necessarily control the environment and what's going on for us out there, but we can think about how we respond to our thoughts and how we respond to our feelings. Worries is something a bit like the environment that we can't control. They're normal, they happen, and they do, they just pop into your head without a second thought. But that's the part afterwards that we're thinking about. So when that worry pops into your head, what do? You push it away, you get caught up in it, do you do something else? So I know a lot of people try to push these worries away. And what do we know when we try to push thoughts away?
Yes, they come back at you 100 times stronger.
Yeah.
I always think that they're like little niggly monsters on your shoulders that you're kind of trying to ignore them and you push them away, and then they just get bigger and bigger and bigger until they're shouting at you and then they won't leave you alone.
I like that way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always think we've got sort of this child in our head. I don't know whether anyone's ever been told, that wall has got wet paint on it, don't touch it. Kind of like, okay, yeah, it is wet.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The waitress puts a hot plate in front of you at the restaurant and says it's hot. The first thing you do is just check.
You're just going to check.
Did I told you?
Absolutely.
When we're told,
it is the same, isn't it?
It's human nature that we tend to do it. Yeah.
And those worries are there for a really good reason as well, aren't they? They're there, they demand attention. They want you to do something about them. And our brains are constantly going on a better safe than sorry system. So, it will be looking for things that are potentially dangerous or things that we think are potentially dangerous in order to try and keep us as safe as possible. So that's what worry is, really. It's just a way of thinking about all the potential possible what if dangers, catastrophes that could happen, in order to try and then problem solve and keep us safe. But it can just be overwhelming. Can I do my pink elephant?
Yeah.
I like the pink elephant. So there's the kind of exercise that you can do here to try and practice this is to just spend 30 seconds trying not to think about a pink elephant. And if I
have a pink elephant,
there's the pink elephant. Don't think about it. Try and push it out of your mind. Jane, you can do this whilst I'm talking you through it. Try not to think about this pink elephant. Try not to think about anything connected to the pink elephant. So don't make the pink elephant grey. Don't make it purple. Don't turn it into a hippo. Don't turn it into a penguin. Do everything you can to not think about this pink elephant. What's happening?
That's all I can think about. I'm thinking about a pink penguin too.
There we go. Yeah, there we go. So actually, in trying not to think about something, what you've done is you've just changed it slightly, but it's still something that's related that wasn't there beforehand. And that's the same with worry. You can try not to think about it, but it'll just change into something else. And then what you're doing is putting all your effort into not thinking about something, rather than, and that takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort, and it's just exhausting. So what do we do with that then? Because I talk to people about kind of worry windows, and sometimes that helps and sometimes that doesn't. But if you are spending a lot of the day worrying, and especially at nighttime's a big one for people when they're kind of going through their minds, is you can get that, if you've got your journal or a piece of paper or something similar that you can just jot, post-it notes, anything, just jot down those worries that are there so that they are getting the attention. And then what you can do, or sometimes that's enough for people, just putting them down on a piece of paper, and some people put them in the bin, some people like to get rid of them somehow. What some people do is put them in a box or put them in an envelope or something, and then at a later time, not near bedtime, but at a later time in that day, is to get them out and allow them to have some space to be thought about, if that feels safe, if that feels something that feels okay to do. It's all very kind of personal. I know for some people it's too overwhelming to come back to those thoughts. It then brings up a whole load of difficult emotions that they then don't know what to do with at that point. But it depends whether those worries are things that need to be heard, or whether it's enough to just write them down and put them away somewhere.
I think that's a nice idea. Restricting it to a certain worry time every day.
Yeah, because you can get carried away with it, can't you? It can be all day long.
Absolutely. And I think having to think about how much time that you're spending worrying about these things every day, and what that's getting in the way of you doing with your day-to-day life. We talked a lot before about those kind of enjoyable activities, and I appreciate that at the moment a lot of things have been restricted and reduced for us. But having a good think about the things that are important to you, the things that you really want to be doing on a day-to-day, and how you want to be engaging and connecting with the world around you. If you weren't worrying, what would you be doing differently? And I think it's kind of being aware when those worries come up, how the worry can drive you away from the things that you really want to be working with and doing. And noticing that. So just noticing when the worries are pulling you away, and actually what can you do then to bring you towards the things that are really more important to you. I wonder if an example might be helpful to kind of put that into a bit of concreteness. So for example, Joe's used the idea of connecting with friends, having a coffee with friends. You might find that actually you're doing that less because you're sitting at home. I say watching TV, but often what we do when we're watching TV, our mind's wandering, it's all over the place. We're not quite there in the present moment. And you're worrying about what the virus means, you're worrying about what might happen if you get it, what you might do if you go shopping, etc. When actually thinking about, what's this doing for me right now? How is my mood changing because of this? And then that might be the point to get up, call your friend, ask if we can have a bit of a coffee together.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, choosing to do something different. And also I think key to this as well, which just popped into my head, key to this is no matter how much worrying you do, doesn't change the outcome, doesn't change the likelihood of you getting this virus. So you could sit all day and be worry, doesn't change anything. Whether you worry about it or not, doesn't change how likely it is, doesn't change the level of risk. There's just going back, Jane, to what you were saying, there is a certain amount of worry and anxiety which then spurs you on to do things like take precautions that we all need to be taking. But yeah, it's when it gets to that point when it's all day long, it won't change a thing. So whether you then decide at that point, okay, so I've noticed I'm starting getting worried, I've noticed my anxiety levels are going up, at that point I can then decide to go and phone a friend and have that coffee with my friend over over Zoom or just over the phone won't change. That won't change whether you're likely to get the virus or not. So it's important then to take steps to do things that are enjoyable in your day. It won't change anything.
Yeah. Okay. I wonder if we move to the next question, because actually as well, I'm conscious that some of these answers to these questions might overlap, and thinking about what strategies are helpful for you. I've done this the wrong way, hold on. There's our pink elephant.
You just brought it back up in people's minds now. I've got rid of it, I'd forgotten about it. Oh, that's
a pink elephant. So another question, and I think I certainly get this a lot, I'm sure you do too, Jo, is that I keep noticing symptoms such as breathlessness and worry that it means that I've caught COVID. I think this is also a question without COVID being in the picture that we would probably get quite a lot, because of the nature of ACHD and how heart conditions sometimes present for us.
I think it's natural, isn't it, to be extra. It's hypervigilance, but it just means paying more attention. You pay more attention to what's going on in your body than somebody who doesn't have to worry about that. So you'll notice all sorts of things going on that just happen to us in the day. Our bodies just do during the day. It's just that you will notice it because it's potentially more worrying and a bit more of a threat for you.
Absolutely. I often tell people to try a little something where you stop just for about 20 seconds and really focus on the saliva in your mouth. Really focusing on what it feels like and how much is in there. I'm giving that a go. What do you notice, Jo?
Well, what I've noticed is my jaw started tingling. and I've noticed that my mouth feels quite dry, and I hadn't noticed that before. But yeah, it's the tingling in my jaw that I've noticed doing that.
That's really interesting that you said you have a dry mouth. As soon as I start to notice my saliva, I actually feel like I've got more, and then I'm desperately trying to swallow, and it's like that can make you feel quite uncomfortable. No, it's not the case. There's nothing about our, Jo's jaw or my mouth that's changed. It's about that hypervigilance and attention that we're placing on a part of our body that maybe throughout this conversation before we weren't really paying attention to.
Nope, I had not noticed my saliva. Thanks, Jane. Now that's all I'm going to notice.
I think the key thing about, and it's, this is quite tricky, the key thing about both COVID and having some heart conditions means that a lot of symptoms arise that we can then tend to focus on, and what we notice when we focus on is they get worse, they get bigger, and there's a lot of overlap with these symptoms and anxiety. I do have, should I share my little fight or flight man?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So this is a diagram of what happens when we get anxious or worried or nervous, scared, all those sorts of emotions, angry, all sorts. This is what happens to our body. This is what our body does. And it does it for a really good reason. So it releases this adrenaline. You can see down by the hand, adrenaline is produced. Our brain just basically floods our body with adrenaline, and what adrenaline does is get us ready to deal with a potential danger, whether that's real, as in you stepped out in the road in front of a car and you've got to get back on the pavement really quickly, or whether it's an imagined one, which is that you've noticed that you've noticed your heart rate increasing slightly, and therefore your brain kind of goes on to high alert. Maybe you've been out for a walk and you're a little bit breathless and your heart's going. Your brain then deals exactly the same as if it was a car coming at you in the road. It sets you off onto high alert and then just does. I mean, there's probably even more than this, isn't there, Jane? I always think there's hundreds of things happen when we get stressed. But these are kind of the key ones, aren't they?
They are, yeah. So we've just got a selection here. But I guess they're very uncomfortable experiences. But the key is here that they are very normal and actually quite key to our survival. So, you know, our heartbeat racing, our breathing getting faster, these are all our body's way of protecting us, because essentially what they're preparing our body to do is what it says on the tin here, is to fight the threat. We need lots of oxygen around our body to be able to do that, and we need our muscles to be able to move. And the same for the flight part. To get out of there quickly, we need that movement to happen quickly. So even though they feel unpleasant, they're actually a very positive way of our body keeping us safe. And what Joe said, I think, is really interesting. I think it's an interesting part about humans, really, because we share this reaction with a lot of animals. But one thing that we do is sometimes we can respond in this way to those imagined threats, like Joe said. So they're not things that are right then in front of us. And it is about the two parts of our brain, really. One being that quite animalistic. I think we call it the reptilian brain sometimes, don't we? Because we share it with even the basic animals, the reptiles upwards. And that's controlled. That's what controls this fight or flight response. So it's kicking us into action. So the lizard getting away from whatever eats lizards. I'm not sure. Should have used that example.
Birds.
As quick as it.
Tiger.
That's helpful because it gets them moving quite quickly. But then it's humans who've got this newer part to their brain that helps us to think and reason things through, which also helps us to worry. And we're worrying about future events that have not yet happened. Now, that connection between the new brain and the old brain is very fast. And the old brain detects that there's a threat being fed down from the new brain, and it responds quickly. But I guess the downsides of that is sometimes the threat, like we said, isn't always there right in front of us. And the old brain doesn't realize that.
I was going to say, I give an example sometimes where, because where I'm working, I have a view out onto my road, and there's all cats roaming around, neighbourhood cats, and I can sit here and I can actually start to make myself feel quite anxious just by imagining one of the cats being hit by a car. If I see a cat wandering across the road, I can start myself off on purpose by going, oh, I wonder if it's going to get hit by a car. And then actually I start feeling anxious in myself. No, I've brought that on. I've made myself feel like that. It's a completely imagined threat. It's never happened out there. I've never seen it happening. The cars drive quite slowly down our road, so actually it probably wouldn't happen. But I've just brought that up and made myself feel quite anxious by thinking that. So that's just an imagined thing that my wonderful imagination has conjured up for me, a lovely story of cats being hit by cars. Which then has left me feeling a bit anxious.
But our minds do that. They're really good storytellers, aren't they? And they will tell us, you said this before, the things that they really want us to know. The things that we really pay attention to, that's the worries that it'll fire at us on our worst unexpected moment. I think, something to kind of bear in mind, and I think for a lot of people I work with, this is the case, that there may be symptoms there because, say, for your underlying heart condition, you might feel a little bit more breathless walking up the stairs. I guess the part that we're saying here is that actually when you have that breathlessness because you've walked up the stairs, you maybe done a bit more exercise than usual, whatever it might be, that new part of your brain then starts to think, oh, this means I've got COVID, this means that I'm having a heart attack, whatever that worry is, it throws into your mind, then kicks off that threat system, and there's a fight or flight, and it makes that breathing that little bit worse, and we're stuck into that cycle there. So it's picking up on that initial symptom, which is a normal symptom given the context maybe of one's heart condition, but it's how we then respond to that.
I think it's key there, isn't it, that there's a point there about having had this happen many times before. I mean, anybody with a heart condition is going to be an expert in their own body, and is going to know all the times before when this has happened, when they felt that they are becoming unwell, they're having a heart attack, they're going to faint, all those worries that people will have. But actually, if you can look back and kind of think, well, how many times have I felt like this before all of this crisis happened? And it wasn't COVID then. It turned out to be nothing. And even in the past 3 months, I guess we've been in lockdown now for long enough that at the beginning, probably I would imagine there would have been times when you were noticing some things going on in your body that you worried that it was COVID. And if it turned out not to be, well then, in 2 weeks' time, you might have felt the same thing again and worried that it's COVID again. But you can go back to those past experiences and use those to remind yourself, well, I remember when I felt like this 3 months ago and it didn't turn into anything. So the likelihood is that this is the same thing going on again now.
And I think another way of managing this is about addressing that kind of fight or flight response as well. So we talked there about some of the symptoms that you get that increase basically in arousal levels. Noticing your breathing. Often I think when we feel quite anxious, and I know I do this, I breathe here, I breathe from my chest, and it can be shorter and shallower, and it makes me feel more panicky. Doing some breathing techniques, and there's lots and lots available, I think, out there on the internet as well. But have a look on. I've got an NHS website link at the end that can show about just doing some breathing techniques. To slow that breathing down, but to bring it down to your diaphragm, so that deep belly breathing. Big breath in and big breath out, and that's tricky. And I know that when I do that, it's quite hard. Sometimes I actually feel a little bit more dizzier doing that because it's a different way of breathing. But if we start to slow that breathing rate down, it does the opposite of the fight or flight. It sends messages to your brain that actually there's nothing to worry about. My body's starting to slow down.
And that's I always call it opposite. It's opposite action. It's doing something that's opposite to how you're feeling. So if you're feeling really anxious, unless there is a threat that you've got to respond to. I mean, obviously, if you're in the middle of the road and there's a car coming at you, doing breathing is not going to solve anything when it's a very real danger. But when it's one of those imagined dangers that actually in that very moment you're at home and you're safe, you're on the sofa and you're watching TV and there isn't a threat, then you can then choose to do something to change how your body's feeling rather than waiting for the anxiety to pass or sitting and worrying with it. Doing that breathing is like an opposite action, right? How can I actively calm my body down? So that breathing signals, doesn't it, Jane, like you were saying, signals that it's safe. You can also drop your shoulders as well, because a lot of people, their shoulders are up here when they're feeling anxious and tense. If you just notice that that's happening and push your shoulders down, that's another way that has a direct link to tell your brain that you're safe.
Absolutely. And I think they're talking about action is key as well. But when we feel more anxious, we might have a tendency to search things, to Google, to look at the media, to find information.
Oh, Dr. Google. Dr. Google.
Dr. Google. Not that kind of Dr. Google. Doesn't always quite know what you're asking. And I think bearing that in mind, so again, it's coming back to what we said earlier about noticing when you might do certain things. They might not make you more anxious to begin with, but if you're doing them over and over, is it working for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think Dr. Google has caused so many issues.
I don't know.
But generally, I always say just don't Google anything unless you're on the NHS website, I think, which is all evidence-based and backed by research.
Yeah.
Really careful what you read.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Shall we move on to the next question? Yeah. Will it be safe for me coming out of lockdown? This is a big question, I think, isn't it? It's a big question.
I think definitely in the last kind of couple of weeks, isn't it? Last couple of weeks, we started to move towards people being out and more being open.
Yeah, and I think that's when I mean, obviously there's still people who are shielding, and we appreciate that. But there's going to be a time when this question is going to be coming up for a lot of us, and what it looks like to go outside. And I think it comes down to a little bit about that risk that we talked about before and how we evaluate risk. You know, I've mentioned that kind of the news and the media and the social media, it's all very hyper focused at the moment on the negative consequences of this virus, of what it looks like for all of us. But I think it's what that can do for us is then inflate that sense of risk around what it means for us as individuals. Now, when I say that, I'm not undermining how we do need to keep ourselves safe, but I think it's about coming back to that word balance again, isn't it? So how much weight are we putting on the risk of us, say, even going for a walk, maybe the risk of then us catching that virus and what that means?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's another wonderful thing about being humans. The way our brain works, we're not very good at calculating risk. We don't generally tend to do it based on statistics and sitting and working out exactly what the risk is. So if it's only this very small amount, I'm safe. It's based on our emotions. It's based on how we feel. So how, Jane, how you feel, how safe you feel will be different to how safe I feel.
Absolutely.
Because we're obviously with different people with different experiences and different backgrounds and different situations going on. And so therefore the decisions you make will be different to the decisions that I make. The decisions obviously that somebody with a heart condition might make would be different again, because they've got other things to take into account. But even within that, you might have two people who have got the same heart condition, but actually making different decisions because of how they feel rather than what the actual risk is.
And I think it can vary day to day. So the studies that show that our emotions can often drive our risk-taking behaviours. So for example, if we're feeling quite angry, we're more likely to engage in risk-taking behaviours than if we were feeling quite anxious. If we're feeling anxious, that's when we do risk avoidance. So we stay away from the things that we think might be that bigger risk. But that doesn't mean, and that's really something what Joe was saying there, is that doesn't mean that that's an accurate depiction of how risky that thing is. We're not very good at weighing that up. And I always like to think a good example is about airplanes. A lot of us, I think, have a fear about flying. That's a really common one. It's an unusual behaviour, if you like, going into this little tin can and flying above the world. Of course, if you think about it in that way, it makes sense that we would all have that fight or flight response at the idea of doing that. But actually, when you look at the statistics, and I'm sure a lot of you have already heard this, it's more risky to get in the car, and you're more likely to have accidents, and there's more deaths from car accidents than there is from any airplane accidents. And I wonder whether that's about how much we're exposed to things. So we don't fly an awful lot. I mean, some of you might, but I know I don't. You probably just that, annual holiday or whenever you might go on a plane. Whereas we're getting in the car every day. They're everywhere. Everyone's got one. So the more exposed we are to something, it's that perception that it feels a little bit safer. This coronavirus is new, and therefore it's frightening. We don't know a lot about it yet, so it's our equivalent of that airplane.
Yeah, definitely. And it's when there is some sort of air incident, even if it's a plane that's landed, and actually everybody's been perfectly safe, but if there's been an emergency landing at Liverpool Airport or something, we all know about it. It's always in the papers. But if there's been somebody that's burst a tyre on the motorway and pulled onto the hard shoulder, that doesn't make the news. It's only when it's a really very kind of major car crash that's happened that it makes the news. That those kind of small incidences, they don't, do they? But then we hear about it if it's been on a plane. And I guess the same with this virus is that it's absolutely everywhere. Every person's story is in the papers and in the news, and You just can't get away from it. So therefore it feels like a bigger threat, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But we haven't heard about the number of people that have unfortunately died from things like cancer, flu. There are, you know, this isn't obviously to move people's anxieties to other aspects, but we face risk every day as humans, and it's how thinking about how we're balancing that up.
Yeah.
I think the aspect of going back out again is a big one. It is tricky, especially when we've been isolated and locked away for the last 12 weeks or so. So making those first steps out of the door can be hard, and I think this is something that Jo mentioned before, actually, about making the small steps, breaking things down a little bit if you feel like it might be a bit overwhelming. So you know, if you haven't, when it comes to it, for example, if you've been shielding and you need to go to shops, it might be about doing it little by little. So not going to the big giant Tesco. It might be about walking to the door of your local shop. You don't have to go in and then walking back home, and just do it in small steps.
I think it's key as well, if you haven't actually been out and you've not really you know, been keeping up with social media and the news and everything, actually it's understanding the reality of what life is like now, because 3 months ago life was very different. You know, people were busy, they were everywhere, there were crowded events, the shops were busy, and now it's a very different setup, which if you go out kind of not really having prepared for that mentally, I think it can be a bit of a, oh, hang on a minute, this is how do I do this? This is a bit strange. All the new rules that are everywhere and people wearing masks and all that kind of stuff. So I think, yeah, trying to do it in a way that's gradual, rather than right, I can go out now, so I'm going to go to Primark. Start off small and local.
Oh, I've just realised I've overlapped it with the next question.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Well, kind of, yeah, they're very similar, aren't there? There's a lot of overlap between those two. So
this is a sort of graphic, really, to kind of show you the idea of breaking things down into steps. You know, if you, I don't know, we've used the example of going to shops, really, haven't we? But if you're going to do that big leap, that's hard, and that's where we think about what makes it a bit easier for you to get there, and design your own little step ladder to draw out that process.
Yeah, definitely. If that top one is, you know, if going to Primark is something that's important for you, then I guess that's the top step, possibly. I mean, it might not be. You might be absolutely fine going to Primark, but it might be that you then have to think, well, if that's going to be too much, it's going to be crowded, and I've got to get my way around the shop and understand all the rules and get used to people in masks. And then, yeah, that first step would be just, like Jane said, walking to the local newsagent or Tesco or wherever it might be, and going to the front door just so I can look and see what's going on.
Absolutely. Okay.
What else are we covering on this one?
I think that might be it. I think, actually, let me bring this back up. I think we have a final slide around just the mindfulness part as well, which probably incorporates it falls into all of the questions, really.
Yeah, it does. Do you want me to talk about mindfulness?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I love mindfulness. I love it. So mindfulness is this term that's been in the press for years now, and it's one of those things that I think some people think, oh, mindfulness meditation is when you're sitting and but actually it's not. Mindfulness is a really useful skill just for living our day-to-day lives. So all it is about is being right here in this moment that exists now. We've talked a lot about those worries that we have about the future, which we sit and get caught up in. Sometimes you might be sitting and going over things, ruminating over things that either that you're missing at the moment or things that have happened in the past. But actually all of those things are just our brain and our imagination, and they stop us from really connecting with the present moment and enjoying what it is that we're doing right here, right now. And also it stops us from realizing that in this present moment we are safe. So all it is about finding a way to bring yourself back into that present moment in a gentle way that's non-judgmental. So that means not criticizing ourselves for when our brain does what our brain does, which is go off thinking about all those worries again, because that's what it will do. So it's not about clearing your mind, it's not about emptying your mind of any thoughts. What it is actually about allowing those thoughts to happen, noticing them, but then finding a way to bring yourself back into where you are at the moment. It says there it's a skill and it takes practice. It really does. There are monks sitting in monasteries on top of mountains, and this is what they do with their life. It's their whole life is practicing in order to be as mindful as they can be. And there's loads of different ways of being mindful. You can sit with headphones on, listening to mindfulness things where you're practicing, focusing on your breathing for half an hour, but also similarly things a bit more mindfully. So if you're doing the washing up, just paying attention to the washing up, paying attention to the temperature of the water, paying attention to the feeling of the cloth on the plates, looking at the bubbles, smelling the washing up liquid, listening to the sound of all the cutlery being washed. You know, we can bring mindfulness into every day. We don't have to find a book of time to sit and do mindfulness practice, but there are absolutely tons and tons of different exercises you can do. It comes back to the breathing again, I think, Jane. If breathing is something that doesn't cause you a significant amount of distress, it's a really good anchor. So it just means it's a really good way of bringing you back into the present moment. We carry our breath around with us. It's something that happens automatically, but it's also something that you can pay attention to, and you can change as well on purpose. So that's why we generally tend to do a lot of mindfulness that focuses on connecting with our breath, and either choosing then to slow your breathing down and do that kind of belly breathing that we were talking about, or just noticing where your breathing's at and how your body is feeling. But yeah, there's a link there, so you can click on that link and have a look, or you can Google mindfulness exercises to find other things that you can do, find things that suit you.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, it's important we always talk about it. I'm sure that people have heard about it mentioned before, because it is evidence-based. It's shown to be effective against a range of mental health difficulties and associated with positive well-being. So the more we practice, the more we make it part of our everyday life, actually the better for our psychological health and well-being.
Yeah, it's one of those things you can control, isn't it? In, again, coming back to that uncontrollable world, you have control over your body, and you have control over this very moment that you're in now. And you know, if you can take action to connect with that, and then decide whether you want to do something to change it, whether you want to change your breathing, or whether you want to do something that's kind of self-soothing, then you can do.
Yeah. So I think we've covered all the strategies that we've kind of listed today. Have you got any final thoughts, Jo? Is that everything?
So we're looking at maybe kind of some strategies to do with breathing, slowing your breathing down, making your kind of your belly breath bigger, making your belly breath bigger, breathing into your belly a little bit more, slowing your breathing down, breaking things down into chunks, those big kind of monumental tasks and worries, possibly jotting your worries down, maybe then choosing another time to engage with that worry, doing some mindfulness, and just being aware of what happens to your body when you become anxious. Bringing your past experience back in again. I felt like this before, and I feel like this now, so what is it that's going on? And it's a pink elephant as well. Yeah.
Well, certainly those things as well that we mentioned about low mood at the start really do help with anxiety as well. So having that regular routine and structure, better sleep, keeping your body active, these all link in together. I think
bit of healthy eating as well.
Yeah, healthy eating, oh, definitely. And being conscious, we've given you a lot of strategies here today. So if I would try little by little. Don't feel too overwhelmed to try everything at once. But if you can incorporate some things into your day to day, making that start. Okay, so I appreciate we've only answered a few questions that have been passed on to us. What we would like, we're obviously going to post this so it's available for our network. If any feedback or comments would be very much welcome. We know that we've kind of glazed over a lot of detail today. So if there's anything that you kind of want to expand in on, we can do sessions more focused on particular areas. It's not a problem. Or if there's any other questions that have come up around how you're managing either in a COVID crisis or day to day in terms of managing your heart condition, we're absolutely up for it. We can always provide future sessions like these if they are helpful for people to answer any questions along those lines. So pop them into the comments box, or if you can, send them along to the ACHD team and they'll pass them on to us as well. But I do want to say, if you do feel like you are really struggling with any of the things that we've described today, and it is getting to that point that you feel overwhelming, do speak to a member of the team. Do speak to your GP. It's important to let people know you don't have to suffer alone.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's that big thing going around at the moment, isn't it? It's okay not to be okay, and I really like that.
Yeah, there's lots of help out there, and I think, you know, with connecting to the NHS professionals, they'll always find the best resource for you. Brilliant. But thank you for joining us today and listening to us. And we'll hopefully see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.